Yes, sir.
But, I was looking through the documents you gave us and the photos. In some of these facilities, are we putting Band-Aids on facilities that perhaps are outdated? And, I know that when we started and built these prisons years and years ago, we didn't have the same type of programs that we have now. They were built for a different era and a different mission. And has there been any thought to how to update these, or looking at other options that may be out there? I know that there are some folks that are shopping the idea of perhaps partnering with some of the tribes in building some of the prisons on tribal land and still being maintained with correctional officers and keeping everything the same, but starting with a new facility, building it to the requirements of what the facility does. Is any of that in the mix, and what are your thoughts?
Well, certainly, you're 100% right that we put Band-Aids on our prisons for a long, long time. CRC, I think, was built in 1945 from an Army barracks. And the staff at that prison have done a remarkable job keeping it together and up. And inmates aren't very easy on the infrastructure, if I'm sure you would understand that. So we have continued to try to put Band-Aids on our system. One of the challenges, as I said, with the population where it's at today, is the inability to close a prison directly at this point, or even try to repurpose it. I think there's been a lot of discussion potentially about how we might be able to replace prisons, but they're hugely expensive. When we built the prison in Stockton, it was nearly $300 million to build, and it's got an operating budget of $300 million, I think it is, 250. So very expensive proposition to add new capacity, and I think the governor would say that you build prisons and they will come, and he and a lot of people, I think, believe that that should not be what we do.
Yeah, I'm not suggesting new prisons or additional prisons. I'm suggesting new prisons, but not additional. So instead of continuing to invest in lost leaders, that if we did build a new prison and shut one down, would there be any economies of scale? Would there be any benefits financially from it, knowing the purpose in which we're going to use it for the next 20 years? And I'm not convinced that we have to own the prisons. I think that we just have to be sure that we control who works in the prisons, and that it's not private prisons, it's public prisons. But having said that, technology is changing. The thoughts on how we lower recidivism are changing. And if we had a facility that we could design from scratch, what would that do for us as far as meeting the needs and also the demands of whether we have women or men in those prisons?
When we've built, we had, I think, 12 original prisons, and now we're up to 35. One of those prisons is a leased facility from a private company that we operate in California City. So we have explored those type of things. I'll tell you, another big aspect to try to address the population is the authority that the legislature gave us to send offenders out into the community with which they're ultimately going to parole. And we have about 1,000 or so inmates out there today, and we've tried time and again to get more, and it's not in your backyard issues. No one has wanted to cite those prisons. I believe, I mentioned the study that we're doing. I believe that study, the original 12 prisons, we have a couple over 200-year-old prisons. I believe that the infrastructure investment is going to drive that conversation of, do we keep these prisons for years and years, or do we do something creative that you're suggesting? But I think it's maybe a polarized issue in a way. There's no doubt about it that our prisons are aged out and the infrastructure has been neglected for a long, long time, as the pictures display. And it's going to require either an investment in that infrastructure, putting the Band-Aids on, as you said, or some other creative way to try to get new facilities to replace these old aging facilities.
Thank you.